I was a billionaire CEO, a man who controlled everything. My multi-million-dollar empire was on the line, threatened by a contract I couldn't read. She was a 6-year-old homeless girl who asked for my leftovers. I almost ignored her. But then she looked at my documents and said something that changed not just the deal, but the entire course of my life. I had no idea this tiny, forgotten child was about to become the most valuable asset I would ever have. He gave his leftovers to a hungry little girl, but what she said next changed his entire life. My name is Julian Croft. I sat in the far corner of Aurelia, an elegant restaurant tucked away in Midtown Manhattan where whispers were worth more than shouts, and business cards were passed like currency. The air hummed with soft jazz and the quiet murmur of power brokering, but I heard none of it. My world had shrunk to the thick stack of papers sprawled across my table. Documents, entirely in Spanish, legal, technical, and dense. A critical acquisition, the culmination of a year's work involving one of Spain's fastest-growing logistics firms, had reached its final critical phase. And the paperwork, the very foundation of the deal, needed my signature by morning. The problem? My trusted translator, a man I had on a 6-figure retainer, had vanished. He dropped out hours earlier without explanation. No replacement, no warning, just a wall of professional silence. I have always prided myself in control. It is the currency of my life. Control of my time, my company, my image. But tonight, with the clock on a multi-million-dollar deal ticking down and my appetite a distant memory, control was a phantom, slipping through my fingers. I leaned back in the plush leather chair, running a tired hand through my hair. The glass of Macallan 25 next to me remained half full, its amber depths untouched. My dinner, a perfectly grilled salmon with asparagus, cooled on a plate I no longer wanted. My thoughts spun in useless circles, desperately trying to dredge up any fragment of the Spanish I'd learned in college. But nothing came. It was just a fog. My phone buzzed, a sharp, intrusive vibration against the polished wood. Another message from my legal team, asking for an update. Another reminder that the deal, my legacy, couldn't wait. I was about to respond with a carefully worded excuse when a small, quiet voice sliced through my concentration. "Excuse me, sir. Can I eat what you're not finishing?" I turned, slightly startled, my annoyance flaring. Standing by my table was a little girl, 6, maybe 7 years old. She was barefoot. Her blonde hair was braided into 2 thin, neat plaits. Her red t-shirt was faded, her denim skirt frayed at the hem. But it was her eyes that held me. They were big and blue, and they stared up at me, wide and undeniably hungry, but steady. There was no trace of fear or pleading, just a simple, direct question. My mind struggled to catch up. A child? Here? "You want my leftovers?" I asked, my voice rougher than I intended. She nodded solemnly. "I'm hungry." I scanned the room, expecting a parent to rush over, mortified. I expected a waiter or the maitre d' to discreetly escort her out, but no one moved. The gentle hum of the restaurant continued, as if she were completely invisible to everyone but me. "Take it," I said, pushing the plate toward her with a sense of weary finality. "I can't eat. I've got too much on my mind." She didn't immediately lunge for the food as I expected. Instead, her gaze fell upon the chaotic mess of papers in front of me. "That's Spanish," she stated, a simple observation. "Yeah," I muttered, "and it's a problem." She hesitated for a beat, a small, thoughtful pause. Then she added, "I can read it if you want." I let out a short, sharp breath that was half disbelief, half bitter laugh. I looked at this tiny, barefoot child. "You can translate complex legal and technical documents at your age?" The girl didn't flinch. She met my cynical gaze with that same unnerving steadiness. "My mom was a translator," she said. "She taught me before she got sick." Something in her voice, in the quiet, factual way she delivered the words, stopped me from dismissing her. She wasn't bragging. She wasn't lying. It was too direct, too certain. It was the truth. Out of nothing but sheer, desperate curiosity, a last-ditch lottery ticket kind of hope, I pulled a single sheet from the pile. It was dense with clauses and subclauses. "Go ahead," I said, a challenge in my voice. "Let's see what you've got." She took the paper, her small, slightly grimy finger moving along the lines. "This part here," she began, her pronunciation crisp and perfect, "it means they are charging an extra fee for international logistic storage, but it's written in a way that makes it seem mandatory. It's optional. You can decline it." I froze. My own limited knowledge was enough to know that she was right, a detail my own team had missed. "And this clause," she continued, her finger moving down the page, "it says they will retain partial ownership of all your assets operating in Spain unless you explicitly reject the specific paragraph in writing." She looked up at me. "You should reject it." I leaned forward, my heart starting to pound with a strange electric energy. I was stunned into silence. It wasn't just that she could read it, she understood the implications. She saw the traps, the loopholes. For the first time that entire evening, I truly saw her. Not as a nuisance, not as a street child asking for scraps, but as the most unlikely savior I could have ever imagined. She had just handed me the missing pieces to a multi-million-dollar puzzle. "What's your name?" I asked, my voice softer now. "Lily," she said. "Where are your parents, Lily?" Her expression, so serious and focused just a moment before, clouded over. "My mom died last year," she said quietly. "We used to live in a shelter. Now, I don't know." I stared at her, the polished elegance of the restaurant fading away, the hum of conversations disappearing. My world narrowed to just her small, fragile frame, her soft voice, and the impossible, heartbreaking story she carried in her eyes. Without thinking, without any of my usual calculated logic, I said the only thing that came to my mind. "Do you want to come with me? Just for tonight. I'll get you some real food, and some shoes." She hesitated for a long moment, her blue eyes searching my face for the trick, the catch. Finding none, she gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. And with that single nod, something fundamental shifted inside of me. I, Julian Croft, a man who had built empires, who commanded boardrooms, who stood on stages and moved markets, realized in that humbling moment that the most significant meetings of our lives don't happen over whiskey and contracts. They happen when we least expect them, in the most unlikely of places. As soon as we stepped out of the restaurant's warm, gilded interior, the sharp chill of the evening air wrapped around us. Lily, in her thin, faded t-shirt, shivered. Instinctively, without a thought, I shrugged off my expensive blazer and placed it gently over her small shoulders. The fabric, tailored for a man my size, engulfed her, but she hugged it close, as if it were the warmest thing she had ever worn. I looked down at her bare feet on the cold, unforgiving pavement, and a pang of something, anger, shame,
I don't know, shot through me. I led her to my waiting car. The valet, a man accustomed to my polished and predictable routine, opened the door with a confused glance, but my firm nod silenced any questions. Once inside the quiet, leather-scented cocoon of the car, Lily pressed her face against the window, her eyes wide as she watched the glowing city lights rush past. She didn't speak, but her expression shifted from a wary caution to a childlike curiosity. I tapped out a quick, discreet text to my personal assistant. Cancel my morning. Call my tailor. I need a full wardrobe of warm clothes, casual and school attire, for a girl, age 6 or 7. Shoes, coats, everything. Have it delivered to my apartment by 8 a.m. Also, food and toys. Something comforting. Something a little girl would like. I hesitated, then added, and a bookshelf, filled with children's classics, Spanish and English. I put the phone away, a strange feeling settling in my chest. I wasn't sure what exactly I was doing. I was a man who brought business partners to my home, not strangers, and certainly not children. My life, my entire world, was a fortress of solitude, designed for control and output, not softness and spontaneity. But this little girl with her steady eyes and brilliant mind had found a crack in the walls, and for once, I didn't feel the need to analyze it. We arrived at my penthouse just past midnight. The private elevator opened directly into the marble-floored living room. I had always seen it as a symbol of my success, a vast, minimalist space with floor-to-ceiling windows, tall bookshelves filled with first editions, and sleek, modern furniture. Tonight, through her eyes, I saw it for what it was: sterile, cold, and achingly lifeless. "You can sit anywhere you like," I said, the words feeling awkward and inadequate. She wandered slowly, her small fingers brushing the edge of a glass coffee table before finally settling onto the enormous sofa, her legs tucked under her, looking like a tiny lost doll in a giant's house. Within 30 minutes, my assistant's delivery arrived. While Lily sat at my kitchen island, devouring a grilled cheese sandwich and tomato soup with a quiet, focused intensity, I sat opposite her, pretending to scroll through emails on my phone. But I was watching her. The way she held the spoon with both hands, as if it were a precious tool. The way her eyes lit up when she tasted the warm soup. There was no performance in her gratitude, just a deep, silent relief. When she finished, I handed her a new pair of soft pajamas and pointed her toward the guest room. "It's yours for tonight. The bathroom is inside. Take your time." She returned 20 minutes later, her face freshly washed, her small frame lost in the cozy, oversized pajamas. She was clutching a small, plush stuffed bear that had been in one of the bags, gripping it tightly by the arm as if it were a lifeline. I stood awkwardly in the hallway, the foreign act of tucking a child into bed feeling monumental. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice muffled by the bear. "I haven't slept in a real bed in a long time." My throat tightened. "You're safe here," I replied, the words feeling more like a vow than a statement. "Get some rest." When I closed her door, I stood in the silent hallway for a long time. My apartment, my fortress, now carried the faint, rhythmic sound of another heartbeat. I walked back to my office, sat down in my leather chair, and stared at the Spanish contract she had deciphered for me. I realized I owed her more than a meal and a bed for the night. I owed her an answer. Why was a child this bright, this capable, this alone, completely invisible to the world? I pulled out my laptop, opened a private database only I had access to, and began to type. Lily. Age, unknown. Last known location, unknown. I typed late into the night, reaching out to my network of contacts, accessing social worker databases, pulling old police reports, and I found almost nothing. It was as if she had been systematically erased, as if she had slipped through every crack in the system. By the time I finally stood up, the first pale violet streaks of dawn were painting the sky. And for the first time in years, after an all-nighter, I didn't feel tired. I felt a surge of something else, a purpose. I walked down the hallway and opened her door just a crack. She was fast asleep, her small form curled beneath the blanket, the stuffed bear tucked protectively against her chest. And in that moment, watching her breathe softly in the quiet, I knew, with a certainty that shook me to my core, that something had fundamentally changed. Not just for her, but for me. I wasn't just a man trying to close a business deal anymore. I was a man who had stumbled upon something far more valuable.
The next morning, I postponed all of my meetings. For the first time in over a decade, the world of contracts and shareholder reports could wait. By the time Lily woke up, I had made pancakes. They were slightly burnt, but they were real. She approached the kitchen island hesitantly, as if the food might vanish if she moved too quickly. "Eat as much as you want," I said. And she did. After breakfast, we moved into the living room, and I brought over the documents again. "Can you tell me how you knew all of this?" I asked. She looked down at her small hands. "My mom was really smart," she said. "She used to do translation work from home. Spanish, French. She homeschooled me for a while. She used to say that books were safer than most people." "And after she passed?" I asked gently. "Shelters, mostly," she answered, her voice flat. "Some were okay. Some were bad. I ran away from the last one a few months ago. It didn't feel safe anymore." She was 6, maybe 7, and she had navigated a world of instability that would have broken most adults. It didn't make sense. I made more calls that day, to child services, to hospitals, to old shelter administrators. And again, I hit walls. In the system, Lily was a ghost. Later that afternoon, I took her shopping, not to show off my wealth, but because she simply needed things. Shoes that fit, clothes that were warm, a proper backpack. As we walked through the store, she held my hand, her grip surprisingly firm. We stopped for ice cream afterward, sitting on a bench in a small park. "I don't know why you're helping me," she said, looking at me with those old, serious eyes. "Most people don't even look at me when I talk." I didn't have a prepared answer. I just told her the truth. "Because you're the first person who has helped me in a very long time," I said. "And because you shouldn't have to do it alone anymore." That night, after she was asleep, I sat in my office in the dark, the city humming outside my window. I thought about my life, my perfect, sterile, controlled existence. None of it felt as real, as solid, as the sound of her small footsteps on the marble floor, or the image of her tiny hand gripping mine without fear. I opened my laptop and began researching something new, not business ventures or market trends. I typed, "How to become a legal guardian in New York." I didn't know where this road would lead, but I knew, with every fiber of my being, that I wasn't sending her back into the dark. Not when she had, in just 2 days, brought so much unexpected light into my world. The week that followed settled into a rhythm that was both foreign and surprisingly natural. My penthouse, once a silent monument to my success, was now filled with the small sounds of life. The off-key humming as Lily helped me make breakfast. The soft rustle of pages as she sat in my office, reading while I worked. The occasional burst of laughter as we watched an animated movie sprawled out on the giant sofa. I found myself working from home more often, not out of necessity, but out of a desire to not miss these small, fleeting moments. She understood, with an intuition far beyond her years, that when the glass door to my office was closed, it meant quiet time. But still, she would occasionally slip in, barefoot and cautious, not to demand attention, but to ask a curious question. "Why do companies need so many meetings? Why is money so important if it doesn't make people happy? I answered her as honestly as I could, and in doing so, I found myself questioning my own long-held assumptions. But it wasn't all light. There were nights I would hear her, soft, suppressed gasps from the guest room. I found her once sitting on the cold tile floor of the bathroom in the dark. She tried to smile through her tears, saying it was just a sad dream. I didn't press. I just sat on the floor with her in the dark until her shoulders stopped shaking. Slowly, she began to tell me about the last shelter, the cramped beds, the yelling, the constant gnawing fear of being moved again, of having to start over in a new place with new strangers. She told me about her mom, about how she used to sing in Spanish. Words were stronger than walls, my mom used to say. But the words didn't keep her alive. I had no answer for that kind of pain. I could only offer the one thing I knew was true. I am not going anywhere, Lily. Not tomorrow, not next week. I promise you that.
Later that week, I took the next step. I brought her to meet my lawyer, a kind, sharp woman named Clara, who specialized in family law. Clara spoke to Lily not as a case file, but as a person. And Lily, in that safe space, answered openly, her memory for detail astonishing. Afterward, Clara told me privately that the path to guardianship would be difficult. Without a birth certificate or clear records, Lily was, for all intents and purposes, a ghost, a ward of the state. But, she added, you were the first adult who has ever fought for her. In the eyes of the court, that counts for more than you realize. That afternoon, I took her to a private tutoring center for an assessment. The director, a woman named Marianne, was stunned. Lily's reading and comprehension levels were years ahead of her age. "This child is extraordinary," she said to me, her voice full of awe. "And from what I can see, she has been teaching herself." When we got home, Lily was quiet. "What's wrong?" I asked. She looked down at her shoes. "I don't want to be too smart," she said, her voice small. I frowned, confused. "Why on earth not?" "Because," she whispered, "it makes the adults leave. They think you don't need help." I knelt down in front of her, taking her small hands in mine. "You can be as smart as you want to be, Lily," I said, my voice firm. "You can be a genius. It will never change the fact that I want to be here. Do you understand?" Her eyes filled with tears, and she nodded, a small, almost imperceptible movement. That night, she asked to help me with my work. I smiled and handed her one of the translated Spanish contracts. An hour later, she handed it back. She had circled 2 phrases with simple, devastatingly accurate notes in the margins. "This part is vague. They might use it against you." And "this word changes the entire meaning of the clause. Check with legal." I stared at the paper long after she had gone to bed, marveling at her. She was a child, yes, but she was also a force of nature, and she was growing right in front of my eyes. On a rainy Thursday morning, the letter arrived. An official envelope from the New York Family Court. The preliminary hearing for temporary guardianship was scheduled for the following week. My hands, which had signed billion-dollar deals without a tremor, shook as I held the paper. This was real. This was about becoming a father. I spent the next few days in a flurry of preparation, gathering documents, character references, and writing a personal letter to the judge. I rewrote it 4 times, stripping away the corporate jargon until it was just the simple, honest truth. I need her just as much as she might need me. The morning of the hearing, Lily wore a soft yellow dress and clutched her stuffed bear, Oliver, in one hand and my hand with the other. The judge was an older woman with kind eyes who spoke to Lily first, asking her about books and dessert. Then the questions got harder. Do you feel safe with Mr. Croft? Yes. Do you want to stay with him? I do. Why? Lily paused, looked at me, and then back at the judge. Because he listens, she said, her voice clear and steady. Because he makes pancakes, even when he burns them. Because he tells the truth. And because he doesn't treat me like I'm a problem that needs to be fixed. The judge then turned to me. Why this child, Mr. Croft? My own voice didn't waver. Because she found me when I didn't know I needed to be found. Because I see the world differently with her in it. Because I cannot imagine my life without her.
2 weeks later, Clara called. "It's official, Julian," she said, her voice warm. "The court approved temporary guardianship with a clear path toward full adoption. Congratulations, she is officially in your care." I walked back into the living room, knelt beside Lily, and told her, "You're staying, for good." She blinked. Then, without a word, she wrapped her arms around my neck and held on, as if she had finally allowed herself to believe it was real. Our life after that wasn't a fairy tale. It was something better. It was real. I enrolled her in a private school that could nurture her incredible mind. On her first day, I knelt down at the entrance and told her, "You belong here, and I will be right here when the day ends." We formed rituals, Sunday bookstores and ice cream, Friday night movies. She left me a small drawing on the kitchen counter every single morning. I kept every one. We visited her mother's grave, and she read a letter to her. "I miss you," she finished, "but I'm okay now." That evening, as we sat on the balcony watching the sunset, she leaned her head on my shoulder. "I think my mom would like you," she said. She paused. "You don't have to be perfect. You're just you, and that's good." I had spent my entire life believing that success came from control, from building walls. But I was wrong. My greatest achievement wasn't the skyscrapers that bore my name. It was sitting right beside me, small and fierce and brave, looking at the world with wide, curious eyes. She had walked into my life asking for leftovers. Now, she had all of me. And in return, she had given me something I never knew I was missing. She had given me a family. The ending of this story delivers something truly rare, a quiet, earned sense of hope that feels both deeply emotional and completely believable. What begins with a chance encounter, an exhausted millionaire and a hungry, brilliant little girl, evolves into a story not about wealth or rescue, but about healing, connection, and the power of choosing each other. I think the beauty of this ending lies in its simplicity. Nothing is flashy, no miracles happen overnight, and yet the transformation feels monumental. Lily doesn't just gain stability, she regains trust, a voice, and an identity. Julian doesn't just become her guardian, he becomes human in the truest sense, discovering joy and vulnerability and strength in love. The moment he realizes that success isn't about power but about people is where the story finds its deepest meaning. To me, the final image, two souls, once broken in different ways, now sitting quietly on a balcony with the world stretching out before them, is the perfect way to close their journey. It's not a dramatic twist. It's not a perfect fairy tale. It's something better, a real, earned, and life-affirming reminder that sometimes the family we never expected becomes the one that saves us.